A campaign to save pubs from the impossible to pay business rate rises, supported by the whip line, has succeeded, but this has sparked a backlash from other firms that are also facing unmanageable changes. And there is another element to this that nobody is mentioning, which is the reason why businesses are struggling in the first place. The answer to that will require more than a rejig of business rate policy, possibly a rethink of the government's entire economic philosophy. First, the facts. The government is expected to say it will make changes to how pubs' business rates are calculated, resulting in smaller rises to bills in recognition of the financial difficulties facing many pubs after sharp rises in the rateable value of their premises. In her November budget, Chancellor Rachel Reeves scaled back business rate discounts that have been in force since the COVID-19 pandemic from 75 to 40% and announced that there would be no discount at all from April. That, combined with big upward adjustments to rateable values of pub premises, left landlords with the prospect of much higher rates bills. To calculate a pub's business rate bill, the rateable value of its premises is multiplied by a set figure called the multiplier. The government had already offered some relief by reducing the multiplier for pubs and may be about to reduce it further. Alternatively, ministers could boost the £4.3 billion transitional relief fund brought in to ease the impact of withdrawing support following the pandemic. But there has been a backlash. High street shops, pharmacies and music venues have called on Reeves to axe business rate increases for them as well as pubs, saying many other kinds of businesses will not be able to pay the higher costs either. So what are we to make of it? Well, it is good news for pubs, but it has dropped the government straight into a much harder political and economic bind. The government's entire business rates narrative is starting to unravel. Treasury officials are openly acknowledging that rateable values for pubs rose too sharply. The interaction with the end of COVID relief made bills unpayable, and pressure from landlords, including more than 1,000 pubs banning Labour MPs, forced a rethink. That is effectively an admission that the original policy was not fit for purpose, despite weeks of ministers insisting otherwise. So for pubs, a further multiplier cut or expanded transitional relief could genuinely prevent closures in the short term, and that vindicates the protest. But if pubs get special treatment, the logic collapses. Every single argument now being used to justify relief for pubs applies equally to cafes and restaurants, live music venues, theatres and cinemas, gyms and leisure centres, independent retailers, pharmacies and hotels. We now see hotels facing 8-figure increases, pharmacies warning of 140% rises, gyms and pools looking at 60% hikes, and music venues warning of permanent closures. They are all asking, why are pubs different? This exposes the flaw in Labour's approach. The government's original line was, we are reforming business rates fairly, shifting the burden, protecting the high street. What the climbdown reveals is that the system cannot absorb revaluation plus relief withdrawal without breaking businesses. Averages and caps mask catastrophic outcomes for real firms, and targeted support quickly turns into political triage. It is not reform, it is damage control. At this point, the government has 3 options, and none are comfortable. Option 1, limit relief to pubs only. That saves face temporarily, but fuels anger in every other sector, invites copycat protests, and makes the government look reactive and arbitrary. The "perhaps we should ban MPs too" line from retailers is not a joke, it is a warning. Option 2, widen relief across hospitality and the high street. That admits the problem is systemic, but blows a hole in Treasury plans, undermines the £4.3 billion framing, and raises the question of why this was not done in the first place. Option 3. Confront the structure head on. That means rethinking business rates altogether, or cutting VAT, or accepting that some fiscal targets must bend. Politically, this is the hardest option, but economically, it is the only honest one. And now we come to the really uncomfortable truth behind this story. This episode proves that my instinct about pubs being an indicator of national prosperity was right on the button. Pubs broke first because they are labour-intensive, footfall dependent, margin thin and rooted in communities. But what follows them is the rest of the high street. That is why the government's good news for pubs moment instantly became a problem for everyone else. And why is the rest of the high street following pubs? It's simply because people do not have enough disposable income to spend there. Business rates are a fixed cost. They hurt most when footfall is low, spending per visit is low, and margins are already razor thin. If people had more money in their pockets, pubs would not be pleading for relief. They would be paying their rate because trade would cover them. The current crisis exists because demand has been crushed, not because pub landlords suddenly forgot how to run a business. That means paying them more, which runs against prevailing right-wing and neoliberal thinking that has dominated the UK economic policy since the late 1970s. The core assumptions of that model are: wages are a cost to be minimised. Insecurity disciplines labour. Desperation produces flexibility. And profits at the top will somehow trickle back down. In reality, what it produces is underpaid workers, weak consumer demand, which is what we're seeing here, fragile local economies, the logical result, and endless emergency interventions to stop visible collapse. That is exactly what we're seeing now. Rate relief, transitional caps, special carve-outs, all attempts to patch over the consequences of suppressed wages. In fact, paying more and providing better working conditions not only makes the workforce happy, but provides a better product and more prosperity for everybody concerned. Until governments accept that truth, these problems will continue. When workers are paid properly, they spend locally, they use pubs, cafes, shops and venues. Staff turnover falls, that means the number of staff who leave tails off, they stay longer. Service quality improves, productivity rises, and communities stabilise. That feeds directly back into hospitality, fuller pubs, longer opening hours because there is demand, fewer closures, less need for tax gimmicks or political firefighting. In other words, fix the demand side for hospitality and all the other high street services, and the supply side fixes itself. Right now, Labour is trying to keep within neoliberal fiscal rules, avoid confronting wage suppression, avoid touching VAT, avoid structural reform, and then the government wonders why it has to intervene constantly to stop visible failure. That is the ideological inheritance of 50 years running up a blind alley. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying pay rises solve everything. I'm saying without more money in the system, nothing else can work sustainably. As long as governments accept the premise that working people must be kept on the edge of insecurity for the economy to function, they will be forced into endless emergency measures, rate relief today, U-turns tomorrow, another crisis next year, until they accept the opposite truth, that prosperity flows from security, not desperation. The high street will keep breaking, and every time, pubs will just be the first warning sign.